Hello everybody, laba diena, gerbiami žurnalistai, baigėsi vienas trūkstančio Europos aplinkos ministrų neformalaus susitikimo pirmoji
The first session of the informal meeting of the EU Environment Ministers has just ended. We now have Minister Mazuronis and Commissioner Janez Potočnik to present to you what the discussion was about, and they will be answering your questions later on. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for finding time and attend this press conference. Today we had our first day of the informal ministerial meeting, and the topic of the first day discussion was financing of biodiversity, the possibilities of financing. This meeting was attended by ministers, environmental ministers, or their substitutes from 28 member states, European Commission representatives, including Commissioner Janez Potočnik. The discussion took place on the basis of the document prepared and distributed by Lithuania. We wanted member states to state their position on the preservation of biodiversity, the current state of play, and the prospects, methods of financing, mobilizing the private capital and cooperation in this area. I think that the discussion was really constructive and beneficial. So I think that this will be it as an overview of today's discussion. And now I would like to ask the Commissioner to add something and to state the Commission's position and approach towards this issue, because I'm not very fluent when presenting the meeting organized by me. I think that the discussion was constructive, and if our agenda goes as planned, and if the discussion on the shale gas and our afternoon's trip to the Pavilniai Regional Park goes as planned, you know that tomorrow we are going to have a very important discussion on climate change and the plans ahead. Among the participants tomorrow, we are going to have the chief negotiator on climate change issues from China. So far, everything has gone according to plan, and I would like to give the floor to Commissioner.
I can confirm that till now everything goes according to plan. No, I think, Valentinas, you have organized the things very well. And I would just like to say that I'm unfortunately not be able to stand after the lunch longer and see also a bit of your nature around the town because I have to go to China tomorrow morning. But just to sum up the things which we have discussed a bit today in the morning, because financing biodiversity, or if I translate it, financing nature, it's one of the things which it's quite high on our agenda, especially because we are seeing major problem of disappearing biodiversity. And that's why we have adopted also the biodiversity strategy a few years ago. When you today discuss whatever financing in Europe in the difficult economic context, it's not easy. If you discuss financing biodiversity in whatever economic context, it's not easy. But I would like you to understand that the things which nature is providing many times for free, if we destroy it, it will not provide it anymore for free. So we will have to invest that we will get it back. Our estimates are that for yearly investment around 6 billion, which would be needed for protection of the biodiversity, we are getting approximately 200 to 300 billion natural services. The problem is that we are normally accounting the costs, but not accounting the benefits. So this is one of the things which, when we talk about beyond GDP and future developments, we will certainly need to address. I would also like to mention that protecting natural capital is in the core of the green economy concept, preservation of the nature, which is basically giving us the possibility that we can go with our economic activities with growth and jobs endeavors in the future. Part of our discussion was connected or focused on the opportunities which are emerging from the new budgetary agreements which are in the final phase on the EU level. What one can easily say is that practically in all instruments, which are the major instruments, there are possibilities for financing biodiversity in common agriculture policy, in cohesion policy, in fisheries fund, in Horizon 2020, which is the research fund, in LIFE, which is basically the only fund which is relatively modest, but it's the fund which is directly connected to nature and or to environment better, and also in external funding. This is an important part. When you mention that, you always mention the word it is mainstreamed. What does it mean, the meaning of the mainstreamed? It means that basically you have a lot of opportunities to use it, but there is no pre-reserved money for those purposes. So it's very much in the hands of the member states. It's very much in the hands of all who are designing the so-called partnership agreements or operational programs, integrated programs, everything which are the instruments which we are jointly designing for the next financing period, for the next 7 years, that those are as priorities present and mentioned. Because as it was nicely put it by one of the colleagues, there are the opportunities and there are the opportunities taken. And with the MFF, with this financial perspective, we have opportunities. They need to be taken. And that's basically the core of the discussion on which we were focusing today. We all mentioned also that it would, at the end of the day, the public funding will not be sufficient. So partnership with the private funding or creating opportunities on the basis of which we would create that the private sector would be also with some leverage coming from the public sector interested in co-financing that, of course, it's important. And one of those facilities is now in development in the European Investment Bank. We call it Natural Capital Financing Facility, where we try with the leverage of our money that we would stimulate bank, that it would give loans which would be attractive and which would address those type of financing which currently it's not addressed very well. Finally, we discussed on our international obligations which we have taken inside the Convention for Biological Diversity, CBD. The last meeting was in Hyderabad. Basically, the topic of that meeting was exactly connected to the financing, and where Europe committed basically that we will double our contribution from all sources till 2015, comparing to the base 2006-2010. So it is a serious commitment which we have done, but this is already old news. That was done something like a year ago. And but this commitment needs to be, of course, followed. We are developing now, for example, inside the European budget tracking, so that we, according to Rio markers, try to identify is the spending connected to biodiversity, is it directly connecting or indirectly connected, and according to that, then we identify how much of the budget is actually contributing to biodiversity preservation. Of course, all the member states would need to do something like that if we want to put all those commitments at the end, which we will present to international community together. And also some member states called for a clear mapping from the Commission side of those initiatives, which we are of course willing to do, but that you can do it, you need to get those information, and those information should be comparable. And of course, we will now work on that. But that also means that we would need to actively cooperate with people who are responsible for the development and people from the Foreign Affairs Services, which is one of the things which you are bound to if you are responsible for environment. You have to cooperate with many of your colleagues if you want to achieve the results. I will not talk about but if you are, because we haven't had the discussion yet about the shale gas, but if you would have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Thanks.
So we have 9 minutes for questions and answers, or we would first of all like to concentrate on the questions related to today's topic.
Okay. I would like to ask Mr. Commissioner about the biodiversity issues. 2 years ago, as you mentioned, you set some strategy to halt loss of biodiversity. At this stage, can you say, are the targets being met? What is the progress? And I have the second question also. Some environmentalists call that you should reform common agriculture policy and to impose some conditions for farmers so that they would need to do something to get EU funding to preserve the nature, to meet some targets. Do you think this could be also the instrument in the new MFF? Thank you.
Strategy, which you mentioned, has 6 elements, and we are working on all of them. Of course, after 2 years, it's a bit premature because the target date which we set to ourselves was end of this decade. And I can just say that we expect that, for example, in one of the proposals out of those 6 addressing invasive alien species, we are also coming very soon with our proposal. So piece by piece, we are delivering those things. I think in Nagoya, there was a major breakthrough internationally. Also, the Hyderabad, I think it was a good meeting. So awareness of the importance of biodiversity and work to protect biodiversity, it's there. We are working on all the lines which we adopted inside the biodiversity strategy, but after 2 years to have a clear answer, yes or no, it's a bit premature. I would, in that context, of course, call all member states, because this is an important part of the implementation, that all the things which are connected with the Natura 2000, and now when we talk about Natura 2000, we basically talk about implementation and funding, that these are really done in a proper way, that the management is done in a proper way, that the funding is guaranteed, the things which we are discussing today. And this would be an important contribution also to the restoration of some of the biodiversity disappearing in the European Union. On the common agriculture policy, the proposal which was finally adopted diverted from the proposal which the Commission has done. And it introduced in some pieces more flexibility, and this is putting much more responsibility on the member states themselves, either and how they will implement it. And that means that I will not cry about that we have now an agreement which I personally believe that it could be better, but we have an agreement which has many of opportunities which could be used, and also for the protection of biodiversity. We have 30% of funding in the first pillar, which is connected to that what you mentioned, that the farmers get the money only if they deliver public good. At the end, that would need to be the philosophy, I think, which we would need to take through the budget, because for delivering public good, it makes common sense that you get public money. While, of course, I was, for example, constantly advocating that it makes sense that, for example, you pay farmers not to pollute the water, because one of the side activities, for example, of the farming, it's also the potential pollution of the water. It's much better to do it in that way, that you pay them, the same farmers, that they do not pollute, that basically that you pay them first for economic activity and then from the same budget to remediate the pollution. So this is the core essence of that kind of integration. As I said, partially, I think we have achieved it. But in future, we will absolutely need to go deeper. I'm not happy that agreement was done in a way that that cross-compliance with the Water Framework Directive was left out. It puts a lot of responsibilities now on member states that this is done in any way, because if I try to translate you to the human language, what does that mean? That it means that also the farmers have to comply with the Water Framework Directive, and like everybody of us. So I think that this is logical, and this is the direction in which we will absolutely have to go. And the promises which were inside the debate done, that the member states will put a lot of attention to that, I think should be simply delivered. Anyway, your logic, in a way, how you have shaped the question is the right one. That's the one which I support. I think that we came a long way already in the proposal of the cap, which is now adopted, but we could and should go even a bit longer.
Kiti klausimai. LRT televizija?
Lithuanian state television? No?
Dabar Lietuvai pats aktualiausias dalykas yra skalūnų dujos.
The most important issue to Lithuania at the moment is shale oil gas. Does the EU intend to regulate exploration and extracting of this gas? Are you going to improve this policy?
Let me start by explaining the current situation in European Union. You have the member states which would like to use and explore the gas, and you have the member states which are banning the use of the shale gas. You have the member states which are asking themselves what to do, and you have economic operators which are asking either the legislation which is currently in place is fully applicable, is it not applicable, how it's applicable, and that's the situation. So on one hand, we have a lot of unpredictability for the business sector. On the other hand, we have not a lot of guarantee to public that human health and environment will be protected. That's the situation in which we are. We have done analysis on the EU level from all the possible angles. One was the energy potential angle, one was the influence on the climate change angle, and the third one was from my area, the influence on the environment and how the current legislation is actually already addressing properly the risk management of the shale activity. Because, you know, we have many of the legislation together with which it's only intention. We manage the risk. Nothing more and nothing less. So we see, we understand that the risk is existing in, for example, in whatever bigger economic activity, and then we set the regulation through which we manage risk so that the private sector understands what they have to take care for, and that the public is rest assured that this is well taken on board. So we believe that that's the same story when it comes to the management of the shale gas. I'm not saying, and the study also showed, that some of the current legislation, be it the Water Framework Directive, be it the Environmental Impact Assessment, and I can continue, it's applicable already today. But we have identified that there are some gaps inside the legislation which are not properly addressing all the risks which are connected with more complex technology which is used in fracking when the shale gas is explored. So our answer at that moment on the Commission level was, okay, let's start working on something which we will present. Our commitment was during this year. We don't know yet what will be either new legislation or will be guidelines or whatever. So we are still in that impact assessment phase, if I can say so, where the decision has not been entirely taken, but the decision was taken that we have to come with a proposal which would properly address the management of the risk on EU level and create a level playing field for all economic actors and for the public to get the guarantee how those things will be done. We are currently doing that. That it's not at all interfering with the individual decision of the member state what will be their energy mix. We just want, like, for example, we have in the case of, I don't know, nuclear energy, where we don't prescribe either you use it or you don't use it, but we have clear rules on the EU level how the security, how safety should be done. The same logic, we think it should be used also in that context, and that's exactly on which we are working. And we hope that we will be able to present it till the end of the year.
If you allow me, I would like to add something. I would like to thank the Commissioner. When we suggested that this issue related to oil shale gas should be included into our agenda, the Commissioner supported us, and I think that the questions that you raise, for example, to what extent member states should be given flexibility, whether the agreement should be reached at the EU level, whether we should agree on some common action and a common code of conduct. All these issues, including this one, will be discussed during our lunch. We are going to listen to the opinions of all the ministers, and I hope that this will help the Commission and the Council to achieve optimum results.
Europolitics, klausimas, or you know?
No. To just follow that question, you told about some gap in the legislation on the EU level on shale gas. How big are these gaps, and are according to you these gaps need some additional legislation right now?
Big enough that we are addressing it. I already answered the first part, that we are in the impact assessment, and after the impact assessment we will see what is the answer, in what direction we should go, what to propose.
Dar klausimų? Prašom. Prašom. Europe Agence.
Aminata Nyang, Agence Europe. Il y a une chose que je n'ai pas bien comprise. I will speak in English. Aminata Nyang, Agence Europe. There's something I did not understand. Commissioner Potočnik, you said that you are going to present, the Commission is going to present something before the end of the year, and you were mentioning guidelines that, no?
I said that we haven't yet decided what we will present. So we are in the impact assessment phase. In the impact assessment phase, you always have to see all the options. You have existing legislation. One of the options is that you just publish the guidelines how to use the existing legislation, and you try to cover some of the gaps via that. There is also the possibility to simply accommodate the existing legislation, to add new elements to the already existing legislation. There is also the possibility that you present a single new legislative act which would specifically address the shale gas. I was saying that we haven't yet decided how the proposal will look, because we are in impact assessment phase. And it is obviously that one thing would need, that we are guided by the fact that you need to get predictable environment to the business sector, that they will know what they have to fulfill. Because the worst thing for them is that they don't know what actually they have to comply with. And the second, that we are guided also with the concern of the public, that they should be rest assured that whatever economic activity, including shale gas, will be done in a way that it will be done safe for human health and in protecting the environment. And the third thing which is important in that context is that we do this relatively quickly, because we see that this is quite a matter of urgency, because a lot of member states today are in different positions, asking themselves in what way to continue, what to do, how to organize, in what way to react, including the country in which we are today. So we simply want to help that these issues would be properly addressed.
Dar vienas klausimas, Reuters.
Hello, Andrew Sitas, Reuters News. I have a question to Mr. Commissioner about emission trading scheme. Has Germany or Spain formed a position with regard to backloading?
My colleague Connie Hedegaard is coming in the afternoon. I think it's better to keep that question for her because she's responsible for that area. I think it's better. You will get better and more informed answer. That's not that I would not want to answer you. I just am not the right person.
Prašom.
Vytautas Dovydaitis, BTV žinios. Klausimas komisarui, kokia kitų šalių patirtis?
I'm just sorry, but yeah, of course I can't get that. That would be better. Thanks.
Could you tell us about the experience of other countries as far as shale gas is concerned? There's quite a lot of opposition to that in Lithuania. Can we demonstrate to the people how really things will be proceeding in this area?
Precisely because of the thing which you mentioned, we are doing what we are doing. It is a lot of opposition in many member states, but it's a lot of also potential which some member states are seeing in going into direction of exploiting the shale gas. We all know that the fact is that in the United States, the shale gas was quite a breaker in their energy policy. The questions which we need to answer in European Union are either we have the same first reserves, because there are not yet clear answers about that, what is really the extent of the reserves in many of European countries. Then we have to answer also, even if we have reserves, do we have the same potential as maybe in the United States? Because Europe is more densely populated than United States. And one of the things which is connected to the fracking technology is that you need huge space. You need open areas to develop it. There are then the questions which people are asking concerning the drinking water, concerning the potential seismic activity, concerning the potential pollution of the air, concerning the use of chemicals and so on, which I think we should properly address, because these are the questions which are connected with the risk management and everything which I mentioned before. And that's what we are doing. So we will certainly look at all those questions which are people's concern and try to provide how we believe that those concerns should be best addressed, but at the same time give the possibility also to the business sector, taking those conditions into account, that they calculate themselves either and how it makes sense that they continue with the investment in the shale gas. That's called predictability. That's what we do in whatever economic sector. And I think it's important that we do it fairly, but at the same time that we address those concerns which you mentioned. Not addressing the concerns of the public, it's never good for business. Because developing a business in an environment where you are not publicly accepted, it's not really a promising economic development, because you will constantly have to face with those questions which you will have to address. So I think it's important that we create those and that we address those questions which are standing here, which we understand. And at the same time, I think we have to confess also that we are better off because the things started to develop earlier in the United States, and we can learn a lot also from their experiences, because these are new things, and whenever you start with new technologies, you have to acquire new knowledge, you have to gather all the facts possible, and of course then in the course also of the activity itself, very clearly follow how the developments are going. But I think this predictability for the business is at most important. Otherwise, you basically don't do the favor to the business sector itself if you don't create it.
I think that it would be better to ask questions on shale gas the next time, because there's going to be a lunch discussion on this topic, and there will be a briefing by the minister on this topic and also on climate change. The press conference during the second day will be also attended by Commissioner Connie Hedegaard. So you will have more opportunities to ask questions. So thank you for your attendance, and until next time.
Kitos progos susitikti.